different plants, different voices, and different ways of having conversations. It's time to get personal with plant medicine. Welcome to Getting Personal with Plant Medicine. I'm your host, Diana, and today I am joined by Alicia Heber, but let me toss it over to her because she's going to explain what she's about.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm Alicia, and I'm the founder of Seed Nest, and we're a women-owned cannabis seed bank. And I'm also the face behind She Grows at Home on TikTok. And so Seed Nest is all about providing high-quality seeds to people to start their cannabis growing journey, while She Grows at Home is more of where I'm creating a community where I share tips and knowledge to empower new growers, especially women, to take up this hobby. And I'm super passionate about making growing from seed accessible and removing some of the stigma. And I'm really happy that I could be here with you today.
I'm happy as well. I love that. Thank you for doing that. Because I usually just get right into it and it might get a little confusing. So let's talk about what got you into becoming involved with a seed bank in the first place.
Yeah, well, there was like several driving factors, and there was just a moment this last April where all these like kind of opportunities and a need personally to develop something for myself in terms of starting a business. But with really the thing that stood out to me was there's already over 20 states that allow some form of home cultivation. And I think when people think about growing at home, it's kind of like, it's really important to medical patients, like that medical programs and having caregivers in that sense, that's been around for a long time. But from the rec side, I think we're also just enamored and excited about the idea of, yes, stores are opening, dispensaries are open, look at all these great products. And yes, I could grow at home, but why would I? You know what I mean? And I think so many people are missing out on such a rewarding hobby and be able to have more control over your flower, especially when you are doing it medicinally, whether you've been diagnosed or not. I think it's all medicinal and it all has benefits, especially depending on how you approach it. Mm-hmm. So when I thought about how many people are in these states who could be growing, who just don't even realize that they can, or it feels intimidating, I'm like, there is something here. And I would love to help, create awareness and help people kind of bridge that gap. I also wanted to create a space for women. You know, seed banks have been around forever and there's endless options out there. And what I have found from my experience when I'd go onto these seed bank websites, even as someone who's been in the industry and in this space for so long, I found just the user experience to be kind of overwhelming, maybe cluttered, but mostly I think they're really speaking to legacy growers and men. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like when you go on there, it's very kind of like 420, kind of, I hate to say it like this, but somewhat immature messaging, I feel like sometimes.
They show you the finished product and you're like, how did you even get there? You know?
Exactly. Yeah. And so I really wanted to create a space that, and I'm not even saying anything specific to women, but just the idea of kind of getting back to nature. Like on our website for our seeds, we show the whole plant, and rather than just the nug, you know what I mean? Because it really is, it's the whole thing. And trying to kind of elevate the experience, and especially by having a curated list. It's great that the other sites have hundreds and thousands of strains available, and that's great for people who are looking for, I don't know, I think it really is for more like the legacy growers who've been doing it a long time, or professional growers. Mm-hmm. I really wanted to make it simple for people who are new to this to have options between photo periods and autoflowers. We can talk more about that in a moment, but all of them being feminized. So that just really makes growing from seed really easy. And we can talk more about that. But that was really kind of like the driving force behind it. And along with really the biggest opportunity is my connection with the folks at Seed and Soil, where we source the seeds, personal longtime friends. And there was just this opportunity where I think a lot of other seed banks who do their own genetics, they also do, their sales and all that as well, where you could be great at genetics, but you might not be great at marketing and getting that in front of people. And so Seed Nest was born out of the idea of sourcing seeds from craft U.S. breeders and making a marketplace that is easy and accessible and inclusive.
I love that. And I think when you just made a really good point, because I think one of the biggest barriers of entry for me mentally is when I hear about the genetics, and I love science, but I'm afraid that I'm going to do something wrong and mess up the genetics or mess up the grow process. And I think the other part of it is that we go to the dispensary to have products that are already made sometimes, right? And I think that there is a disconnect there. Like, well, I mean, why would I make my own pre-rolls, or why would I do this? That's just so
Mm-hmm.
much work. But in reality, the cannabis plant can be broken down and used very easily without a lot of tools. Or, I mean, even the leaves themselves, you can use just to eat and put in your
Yeah.
smoothies, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, and that's why I'm so drawn to your TikTok account, because it's so informative and it's so accessible. And it makes me want to move on to your farm with you.
Right. Yep, I got a little homestead here, and
Yeah.
I got cannabis plants growing, kids running around, a bulldog, ducks, and chickens. It's pretty
That's
special.
awesome. And I know you have a background in marketing, but how did you take that and start? How did that translate into your TikTok
Right?
following? Because you have quite a following, and it's very
Yeah,
amazing.
it's been pretty amazing. Like, and I started this in April, and I wasn't quite sure where it was going to go and how it was going to go. But I'm just like, I know the power and the reach of this platform, and but I also knew the limitations around cannabis. And so I don't know.
You're
I just
really good
really
at that, by the way.
thank you.
I usually get kind of annoyed sometimes when people are like the doinka doinker, and you're like, what are you
Well,
saying?
Well, there's a couple things.
Yeah.
Well, one, we'll talk with my background in marketing. I got a lot of experience by working at a industry disrupting startup in San Francisco before I moved out east. And I don't really want to get into the specifics of that company, as I signed an NDA when I was done with them. But essentially, it was an industry that was ripe for innovation, and we got in front of people by really sharing educational content, building community, and being more inclusive. And I think what we were talking to is more to women in that field as well. And so as I was looking at, some of the different stats that are coming out, like 30% of women are cannabis users, how many millennial women are now taking up gardening as a hobby? Like, so many people in like the millennial Gen X generation are now really trying to kind of come back to their roots of having a garden, having some ducks and chickens. And I see growing cannabis as a part of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been an interesting journey of where I kind of started with like the trending audio, just trying to like find my community, like doing that kind of stuff just to find the other, people who enjoy cannabis and whatnot. I feel lucky in a way where TikTok is funny, where, like doink-a-doink and all these different terms that we're using to get around it. But gardening started trending as slang.
Right. I was going to say gardening works really well, and especially for what you're doing.
Exactly. And so I think that's worked well because I am talking about gardening, and I'm talking about gardening cannabis plants. So it's kind of like it's worked that way. But again, I appreciate everyone out there who is trying to normalize consumption, normalize the plant and all of that. But there's so many, I think, content creators who are just like, look at me smoke. You know what I mean? Look at me eat this garden gummy, and that's fine. But I want to talk more about like value and like how you can do things yourself and educate people rather than just like, oh, it's normal to get high.
Yes, thank you.
So,
we just did an episode about that. I mean, not to cut you off, but that's speaking to my soul so hard right now because I feel the same way. It's like I think that was valid at a time, and I think that it's right now we need actionable takeaways. We need things that we can do. And especially older millennials, we want to know, how can we do that? Like, how can that be easier for us?
Absolutely.
So it's like a perfect time because you were primed. Like, I think it really is perfect because a lot of people in that age bracket started gardening because of the pandemic, right? It was like a big... Why don't we look in our own backyards? I mean, I know I did.
Right. Totally.
I was one of those people that would say, oh, I don't have a green thumb, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And I'm not saying I don't make mistakes all the time because I still do. But now I have like just this renewed interest in gardening and growing and seeing it from the beginning to the end and all of that.
Totally.
So, speaking of all of that and growing, let's talk about what you mentioned earlier, feminized seeds, because I think that is another misconception. I remember back when I was a teenager and I would think that like if I got seeds in a pack, and it actually worked out sometimes if I tossed it into some, dirt, it would grow. And I think a lot of people still think that who don't really understand what feminized seeds are. So why are those so important, and how do we get them?
Yeah, feminized seeds are incredibly important, especially if you're a new grower. And I think if you're growing for personal use, if you get a regular seed, there is a chance that you could have male or female plants. And I do get a lot of people in the comments who aren't necessarily customers, but people are asking, like, how do I tell the difference between a male plant and a female plant? I'm like, well, you don't even have to have that question if you get feminized seeds. And so when you get feminized seeds, you're going to know that as long as you cultivate those plants and give it the TLC that they need, they will produce THC rich buds. And so to me, it's just like a no-brainer on feminized seeds being the place to be, unless you are looking to breed your own strains and create your own seeds, which is a more kind of like advanced technique and really not my area of focus, right? So really just thinking about beginner gardeners. So feminized seeds are awesome because, yeah, you just know what you're going to get. And especially when you think about plant count limits, you know what I mean? A lot of the places where you're allowed to grow, you're only allowed X amount of plants at a time. And so by making sure that all your plants are female, like you're not wasting your resources and space and like all your effort. So that's why I recommend that.
Could you speak to that a little bit more? So, because that's a very interesting point, because in Maryland, there's a limit on, and some of these states are even more limiting. So how does that exactly work? I mean, you don't have to get like super into the detail.
There's a little bit of a strategy to it that I think that I've kind of like, not strategy, but there's a way of thinking about it that I don't know if everyone has. And I see this come up in my content in the comments, is especially with also autoflowers. And so when we think about cannabis seeds, photo periods are typically like the traditional plant we think of that grows, for like 9 to 10 weeks. And if you grow outside, it's like all summer, and they follow the light cycles is what makes the plant go from a veg state where it's simply just growing. And when that light cycle changes from like 18 hours to 12, it makes it go into flowering. And so you can do that outside by following the seasons, or you do it indoors by adjusting your lights. Autoflowers are spectacular. I love them because they can be harvested within about 85 days from sprout. And they're called autoflowers because they automatically transition from grow to flower. And so it's a really kind of hands-off experience. And so when I think about maximizing plant count, it's one, making sure your seeds are feminized, knowing that all your plants are going to be female. But the way I balance it personally growing at home is for us, it's having so many plants that are in flowering at a certain point. So if I know I'm growing photos, I know that they're not going to be in flowering until September, October, but I could probably get 2 cycles of autoflowers in starting in April, May, harvesting those in, midsummer, and then getting another one started before I harvest my photos. And depending on where you live, you could do that year round. And so autos are great because they give you more variety, I think, you know what I mean? Photos are awesome because, yeah, of course, you're going to have a huge yield and all that too. But I think the autos are really great for beginners because there's less guesswork. It is simply, if you have a feminized seed, placing it in quality soil, water, sunshine, you can give it nutrients, or you can make your own DIY nutrients at home too, depending on what you want to do. But you also don't need to do that. And again, I kind of speak to it on my, TikTok, but it is a spectrum of a skill. And so I think it can be intimidating because some folks are, truly experts.
Yes. I get intimidated about the soil. Yeah. Like I grow a lot of herbs now, and I keep trying to get the soil correct, but I don't really understand it either. As much as I read about it, it's like my brain just does not process it the way it does other information about plants. Yeah. I'm like, can I just put some coffee grinds and some, eggshells in it and call it a day? And it's like, no. No, you cannot. You might kill this plant. So I get really kind of stressed out about the soil situation. So hearing that is music to my ears, because when I can find a sturdy plant that can withhold that or withstand that kind of, unpredictability, because, especially when it's outside and the seasons keep changing, even when they are supposed to go a certain way, it's not exactly what you... But anyway,
I would love to hop in on the genetics part of that too. Yeah. So that's a huge part of it. And so I source the seeds that we offer at Seed Nest from a mom and pop farm called Seed and Soil. And what they do is they grow from large populations, like 5,000 plants outdoors. And they really don't baby them. You know what I mean? Like when you get seeds from an indoor grow, those are, really set for this like
a little nursery,
perfect,
like a little baby from a
prime
nursery.
perfect little environment. When
Yeah.
in reality, that's not going to be most people's situation. So they grow outdoors, large populations, and they, battle the elements, and they pass on those strongest genetics for sale. And so the seeds that we offer are, tested and true for outdoor growing and really resilient to pest, disease, and mold. And I was really, really happy with my grow this year, where I really didn't have to do anything in terms of pest mitigation. I did some nutrients from, a kit that offered it to me to try out, and I was happy with it. But you can do as much or as little as you want. You know what I mean? And so if you're just getting started, don't be worried about all the different things you can do to enhance your grow. Just grow, just start. You know what I mean? Especially with the autos, because, it's just with that shorter time period too, I feel like it's not that as long of an investment financially and like emotionally as you can have with your photo period. And if something goes wrong towards the end, or if you get mold at the end, that can be pretty, devastating and make people feel like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. But the autos, it's so simple and so user friendly, and you can learn as you go. And so one of the biggest things that I try to instill in people is to give them the confidence to get started and kind of hopping back into a learner's mindset. Like, we can't be afraid to make mistakes and learn as we go, but really it is such a simple process. And I think people feel really intimidated by it. And I think that's also because of just how prohibition has been. And then,
and the smell. People are so afraid of the smell.
Well, that's where outdoor is good too. So,
yeah.
But it's interesting where I think it's not even cannabis. We've really lost our connection to nature.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thinking about the way that our grandparents, our great grandparents, our ancestors would farm, you know what I mean? And like, they would have great seasons. They would have hard seasons. They would learn how to work with nature and provide for themselves. And across the board, we've given up self-sufficiency for convenience. And convenience is great, but there's something to be said about having these skills yourself, and you got to just learn it, and you got to just get started. And so I'm trying to create.
I really feel like it's one of the most rewarding things when you see your plants start to sprout up. Like, people aren't seeing this on screen, but my Draciana tree back here, I'm probably not saying that correctly, but I've had her since she was a baby, and she's now sprouting little babies, and it's been like many years later, and I just love to see how tall she gets. I mean, I have lots of other plants, but I love, it can be quite devastating when they die, but it's also like, you learn so much, right? Yeah. And it is really rewarding. At Silly Rabbit Medicinals, we're more than just a family business. We're a family on a mission. For over a decade, we've been dedicated to providing safe, affordable access to high-quality plant medicines that heal. We believe in the power of nature to offer real, lasting healing. That's why every plant we grow is nurtured with intention, and every batch is lab tested to ensure the highest quality and potency. When you choose Silly Rabbit Medicinals, you're not just a customer, you're a family. We take pride in doing good for our community and beyond, offering medicine that truly makes a difference in your wellness journey. To learn more about our products, browse our selection, or connect with us directly, visit sillyrabbitmedicinals.com. That's PSILY, rabbitmedicinals.com, where healing begins with care. Silly Rabbit Medicinals, healing from the heart. Safe, affordable, and always with you in mind. So, to that point, what have been like the most rewarding points of this journey so far, and what have been some of your biggest lessons?
Yeah, definitely the biggest or the most rewarding has been growing Seed Nest. The idea of starting a seed bank as a new kind of entrepreneur, small business, really bootstrapping the whole thing. And to see now where we've really have grown significantly and had so many customers all across the country. And so it's been so great, especially to see how I thought it might really resonate with women. most of my customers and most of my following are women. And I love that. And I love all the men who are also supportive and great about and are customers. But that's exactly what I thought would be the case. Like if I can get in front of women and talk about this and help them feel like they can resonate with me and feel not so like alone or stigmatized. So it's been great to see that. And then hearing from our customers, like how successful they've been this last season, and then just all the information that they've had. And so to see the impact has been so rewarding. And then, also as she grows, just that account has been growing, our followers or whatever, the community. And so that's also been very rewarding because, again, there is only one right way to grow this. There's many ways you can do this. And I share my tips and insights, but then other people hop in the comments and they share what works for them, and so to see that sense of community and conversation that can't really be had in most places, I feel that's been great.
Honestly, and you're really onto something here. I mean, it's like, it seems like such an obvious thing, but it's not, but there's so many barriers mentally around it, right? And I think like the more we all start embracing growing it ourselves and actually being in touch with the plant, because even if you don't use it yourself, you could find uses for other people in your family and your friends.
Absolutely. And you can grow just to make your own edibles too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you don't have to like have the most beautiful buds necessarily to get the effects that you want. Like that you can make it into edibles and salves and whatnot and gift it to your friends. I give parts of my harvest out at Christmas to people because I love so much. I'll make fudge and lotions and give flour, and so that's fun.
I wish I lived closer.
I know, we'll figure something out. But that's been super rewarding. Of course, there's been challenges with getting the business started. There are still different barriers to entry with this business, even though, seeds are recognized as hemp. And that's what kind of the beauty of it is that, and it causes confusion for people too, right? So on our website, it says that, these are considered souvenirs and collectibles and there's no THC in them. And that's all because it's true, right? So cannabis seeds don't have any detectable THC in them when they're in the seed form. You have to grow them, and that's when the THC develops. And so these seeds can be sold and shipped across the country. It just depends on your local and state regulations on whether you can actually grow them or not. And so to kind of like appease the powers that be that are involved in supporting a business like this, we have to say collectibles and souvenirs, and there's no THC. But that's also what kind of like the beauty of this is that you can try to regulate nature, right? You know what I mean? But it's like, you can't though. You know what I mean? Like you can regulate the flower and I guess the products and the things that come out of it, but essentially it all starts with a seed. Yeah. And I think we forget again, because of our disconnection with nature, that everything starts with the seed. Everything you need is in that seed. Yeah. And that's really been the beauty of it. And I also did not have any background in traditional gardening. I never grew cannabis before until back in, I think it was like 2016 or so when Colorado legalized recreational use. I worked at a dispensary there. I was a bud tender and I worked behind the counter also as a medical bud tender. But at some point, I wasn't at work that day. They got robbed at gunpoint. And that scared the shit out of me because obviously, and I'm also a mom and I was doing that as like a part-time job back then. And I was able to speak with the owner and I got to work behind lock and key in the grow. And so that's where that was the best. So I was around hundreds of plants, taking care of them. And I really loved harvesting the plants, trimming them. And then as I was doing that, I would sometimes find seeds in there. And at that point, I brought them home. And I'm like, hey, I shared it with my husband. Like, look, I got these seeds. And that spring, we just like, well, let's plant them. And we had success. Like, it's just that simple, And so that was just like a fun personal experience that we had back then. And then we grew at home over the years. But now just kind of getting, I think, a little bit, not jaded, but seeing the industry differently now. I think as we see, when I was doing it then, it was that the guy I worked for who at the dispensary was a medical advocate and really got into it because he knew personally the healing power of this plant. And now, we got capitalists hopping in with both feet, corporations, and it's just, it's changed. Yeah. And so I'm like, well, if the laws are allowing people to grow at home, why the fuck not?
Exactly. Exactly. I think that is so powerful on so many levels because I think that the, the business focus of the industry has definitely pushed out a lot of people. I mean, even in our first few seasons of Your Highness podcast, I went back and looked, and I think like in the first 3 seasons, I interviewed, I don't know, over 100 people, and I would say that 90% of them aren't in the industry anymore. I mean, that's just an anecdotal thing, but I've seen it in a larger sense as well, where the people who were really trying to get, you know, the people who were trying to fight for the things that you're fighting for right now they were pushed out for so many different reasons. But this is a different, I don't know. For me, it feels like a different way of connecting with it. And it feels like this is a little bit less scary in a lot of ways, because once we realize we have that power and it is legal, because obviously it's not legal in all states. So that's,
right.
We have to say that. But if it is legal in your state and you take that chance and you say, well, let me just try it and see what happens, that can be so powerful on so many levels, because it's like you're taking it into your own hands. And I know a lot of businesses out there are fighting against that because they want people just to go into the dispensaries to buy. But that completely goes against the idea that it's just a plant and that we're all supposed to just enjoy a plant, right?
Yeah.
So I know the mental gymnastics are like, you know, are quite a bit for the, you know, I know I'm kind of going back and forth.
No, it's great.
But it really is like, it's just reframing the way we think about it and the way we talk about it, because we're willing to grow so many things and, you know, try sourdough and start kombucha and all this other stuff. And it's like literally the same thing. It's just, what's the difference? It's a little smelly. Well, so is basil. So are a lot of other herbs that you grow, right? And who cares? You're smelling it everywhere anyway nowadays if you live in a legal state.
Exactly, that's true. One of the things that I really appreciate about my friends over at Seed and Soil is, like they're experts at what they do, and they have a huge, you know, field where they're doing their seed production and all that. But they also have a huge vegetable garden as well.
I saw that. I love that too, because it's like everything, right?
Right. And so it's the idea of your complete garden.
Yeah.
And so, yes, cannabis is incredible and it's special. And I know that it's like on a different level compared to, you know, cauliflower, but at the same time.
But chamomile is also very powerful, you know? I mean, you start with just one herb and you can tell like sage, we're growing sage and chamomile right now. And it's like, wow, I really didn't realize how powerful sage is. Like, it has so many awesome properties.
Right.
But yeah, it's basically the same thing. So, speaking of seeds again, obviously that's what we're talking about, but what advice do you give people about choosing the right seeds and setting themselves up for success in this situation?
Yeah. So again, it's just start simple, and like the feminized photo periods or autoflower seeds are perfect for beginners, again, because they're easy to manage and really don't require a lot of advanced knowledge or even, you know, setup. If you're able to grow outside, whether it's, you know, in your backyard or on your patio, those are great because they're smaller and just easy that way.
And those are for the autoflowers too, right? Like I didn't mean to cut you off, but we should.
Oh, that's okay.
There is a difference there. If you only have a patio like I do, autoflowers would be the only option, right?
That's the one I would recommend for sure. Yeah, and it's again because you might not get that kind of light exposure on your patio that would be required for the photo. And so if you don't have a light setup, if you live somewhere where you only get a little bit of sunshine, or especially if you feel like you need to be discreet, you know what I mean? Some states require, if you grow outside or if you grow at all, it needs to be under lock and key. And of course, you know, follow your regulations. But I'll also say that the autos then are also really, they're much smaller. And so if you're nervous about having a big smell, you don't want your neighbors to smell, like a photo is definitely going to have more of that, where the autoflowers are going to be smaller and it's just going to be easier that way. And it's a great place to start. And once you grow an auto and have success with that, you might just be very happy continuing to grow autos, because the thing that is so funny about this time of year for me is we just harvested all of our outdoor. And now I'm just like, what do I do? I loved growing. I loved being outside. I loved tending to my plants. And of course, now we're in the other process of like drying and curing, but that's, you know, fairly hands off. And so the idea of doing autos, you could do autos year round, depending on where you live outside, or if you had an indoor setup, you can do it too. But essentially, yeah, you could just always just do autos, and you could be harvesting like every 90 days or so. You know what I mean? And so you can keep that hobby going. But
outside, even if it's like, doesn't matter
outside
season?
you can, yeah, as long as it's not with it like going to be freezing. You know what I mean? That's
okay.
So but again, the more light you give it, the bigger it's going to be, so that's advantageous. So obviously, like, you know, if you're in a sunny place, but when I think about folks who live in the Southwest, you know, where it's really hot in the summertime, and you know, they don't want to or can't even grow a photo period in the summertime because it's too hot where they live outside, like 110, 120. I used to live in Arizona, I know. But yeah, then they can grow autoflowers in the spring and the fall. You know what I mean? And even though that the light is different, it's a prime situation. So it really does depend on where you live, your local regulations. But I find that autos give you more flexibility while a simpler process than the photo periods. And so regardless, though, it depends on kind of like your flavor, your skill, where you're at. I think autos are great for beginners, but regardless, feminized seeds, I wouldn't even mess with regular if you're able to, just for the sake of not having male plants unless that's what you're after. But if you want to grow plants that are going to produce THC buds, it's feminized photo periods or autoflowers.
So why would somebody grow a male plant? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It just
no,
popped
it's
in my
okay.
head.
Yeah.
Like, wait, why would they grow it?
It's for anyone who would want to make their own seeds. Like if they wanted to make their own strains, or even just be more, you know, self-reliant, I guess, like that. There's definitely, there's a time and a space for that. That is more of like an advanced technique. And same with like, if you were to make your own clones, if you had a female photo period that you kept in the growth stage, you can do that by maintaining the lights a certain way. You could keep a female in growth and then be able to cut the, you know, and make in clones. And so those are more like advanced techniques. And those are for people who, you know, I'm not really an expert in that, in either of those, but they exist. And so, yeah, if you're like me who wants to grow your own at home, like feminized photos or autos are my number one recommendation. Then again, good soil, and just, you don't have to overthink it too much. Again, I love Coast of Maine, yeah, Coast of Maine and Fox Farms. There's some really great ones, but you just really want to get something that's like living soil, that has already some of the nutrients in it. It's just good soil. And again, it's just really, it feels like an intimidating thing because we don't talk about soil. We don't buy soil like most of the time, you know what I mean? But it's just a little bit of education, and it doesn't take much. It's just like the confidence just to get started.
Yeah. Not to get all conspiracy theory, but I think that was that our disconnect is for a reason. I think we've all been programmed to think that we can't grow our own foods and our own, you know, nutrients and things like that. And it's like, no, we can.
Yes.
It's funny because you talked about ancestors and farms and things like that. And my grandfather used to have a farm in Maine, I'm sorry, way before I was born. But we don't have that in our family. It didn't carry on. I mean, he always grew, you know, tomatoes and things like that, but it was always just like, you know, it wasn't as big of a thing. It wasn't a part of the conversation. It was just something that he did to relieve stress, and it was something my parents did to relieve stress, but it wasn't something we brought in. It wasn't immersive, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't something that was part of our whole lives all the time, if that makes any sense at all.
Absolutely. And that kind of information would be passed down, you know what I mean, through families or through friends. And as we've gotten further away from traditional farming and gardening as a society, you know what I mean, now we are dependent on corporations and the market or whatever to give us what we need, and we feel disempowered, and they want us to feel disempowered. And I see cannabis being the exact same way, especially now that we see what this market what it can be. It's such a high dollar, so there's gonna be so much money to be made, and I want more people to have the power themselves to do it themselves. And of course, there's a ton of space for dispensaries. I still go to a dispensary every once in a while, like that's fine, but I grow my own at home, and more than anything, yes, the final product is sweet. I love having it, but I love the process. It's just tending to your plants, being outside, caring for it, seeing how it develops, and developing your own connection with nature. And I find it's a connection with myself too. Like just, I don't know, it helps you slow down, you know, and it's grounding. And I think as soon as people start, they realize, it's great that I can have my own bud at the end of it, but it's like, I love doing it. And I think that's where people get hooked in a way. It's not even necessarily about the final product. And of course, that's a huge part, but it's the process and what you learn along the way.
Yeah, you become connected because they're living things and you're taking care of these living things, right?
Yeah.
But also, I love how you cover the after parts on your
Oh,
TikTok,
yeah.
because I think that's the other barrier for me mentally is like, how do I harvest this?
Mm-hmm.
Because I spend a lot of time reading about how to harvest my herbs and I still don't think I do it correctly. And then I'm like, oh, if I, cut this the wrong way. And so I do stress out about that a bit. So to that point, what is the biggest misconception that you encounter on a regular basis from people about this
Right.
process?
I think there's two things. One I've touched on, I feel like a bit, is that it has to be difficult or incredibly expensive. It really doesn't. It can be a choose your own adventure on what you want to do. If you can get all the gear and the controlled environment and do that way, and you can be successful. You can also throw a feminized seed in the ground with good soil, water, and sunshine, and you're going to be successful too. And so it really is just wherever you want to start. And I recommend starting simple, and then you can learn and take on different techniques or whatever as you go. I think the other misconception is that women don't do this, that women don't want to do this, and that there's only one way to do it. And there's this quote that I found from my friends with Seed and Soil, that Rumi, it's just like, let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. And that's from Rumi. And I think about this with cannabis because there are so many different approaches and different ways you can do it, and none of them are necessarily wrong. I just want to give people the foundational information so they can move forward with confidence on getting started and find the method that works best for them. So I think those are the biggest misconceptions.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy that we're kind of breaking through those, because I think I am showing that it doesn't have to be difficult.
Yeah.
You can be a woman, a wife, a mother, and a member of your community and be open about cannabis consumption and growing it yourself. And there's so many ways to do it. Don't let anyone tell you, never do it this way or only do it that way. I really try to avoid that because, again, different environments, different goals, different, there's so many different things. And so I can't tell anyone this is the only way to do it, but I love sharing how I do it and then learning from people too. You know what I mean? Again, it's that learner's mindset and being open to growth yourself.
I love that. And I mean, I can't think of a bigger driving force than what's going on with inflation right now.
Right.
Because that is pretty much where I'm at, where I'm like, I cannot keep spending money on this, this quality of product. It's just, I'm literally throwing money away,
Yeah. It doesn't have to be like that. And especially Yeah.
So we'll leave it at that.
We'll leave it there. That's a whole other can of worms we can go into.
Yes, and so we will TikTok. No, we will link to your TikTok in the show notes. But tell people where they can find you and how they can support you.
Thank you for asking. Yeah, so check out Seed Nest. That is our seed bank where you can buy feminized seeds at the seedneststore.com. And I'd love to share a promo code that you can perhaps throw in the show notes for your audience as well, to give them a little something to help them get started. You can learn more about our strains and descriptions on our Instagram. Again, some of the barriers to entry with this is I have to keep the website fairly kind of bare bones. So if you head over to our Instagram, we have much better descriptions on each of the varieties that we offer. And you can learn more about Seed and Soil and see a video of when I was walking around their farm just last week. It's pretty special.
That's amazing.
And then, of course, you can find me on TikTok at She Grows at Home, where I'm sharing more info. And like I've said, I've been harvesting my outdoor plants. We're now drying and curing and sharing that kind of content. But I am going to be transitioning into more different infusions and recipes that you can make, especially around the holiday season, like things you can gift with your flower. But I am super excited because I'm going to be starting my own indoor grow soon. So I'm starting to get the pieces together of that. And I will be sharing those highlights on TikTok, but I also plan on sharing some more long form contents there on YouTube. So there's lots of places, but I hope you would join us on any of those. And whether
check
you get
out our
seeds
Substack soon, right? Because we'll be putting it on there on our Your Highness Media Substack. So
exactly.
Well, it has been a pure joy today, and I learned so much. So please come back anytime, and I know we'll be doing more educational content together. So I appreciate it. Thank you again for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
This podcast has been a product of Your Highness Media. Each episode is written, produced, and edited by Your Highness Media. Thank you for listening.